Remember when you were 23 and those people that were in their 40s and 50s were like, just wait, you'll see it. When you hit your 40s, everything's gonna change. And now, okay, what used to be that chocolate cake you could consume and you just would feel like your body would suck it up and you'd have energy and you just go jump on the trampoline and burn it all off. But now you have that piece of chocolate cake and you're like, ugh. It's not because you're getting old. It's because your body has a natural process of losing its ability to utilize carbohydrates and glucose super effectively. Okay, so yes, there is some disclaimer that we have to say that realistically, once you're over the age of like 38, 39, kind of roughly in there, you probably do need to pay more attention to your carbohydrate intake. At least that's my opinion based on the research that I've been reading for the last like 6 years. Okay, but there are some ways that you can improve how you utilize carbs over the age of 40. Okay, now what we have to look at predominantly is the age-related decline in what is called pyruvate dehydrogenase. Now, there was an interesting study published in the journal Life Sciences. Now, it looked at just that. It found that as subjects got older, their levels of PDH, pyruvate dehydrogenase, would decrease. Now, what's interesting about pyruvate dehydrogenase, other than being a complicated word? Well, we see a decrease in pyruvate dehydrogenase in people that are type 2 diabetic. Well, you're not type 2 diabetic, but you're getting older, so does it matter? Well, the point is that there are relationships between getting older, pyruvate dehydrogenase, and also type 2 diabetes, pyruvate dehydrogenase. So my point in saying this is, as we get older, we develop some like consistencies with type 2 diabetes, which is kind of weird. Well, my point in saying all of that, pyruvate dehydrogenase supports the cell's ability to process glucose effectively. If we have high levels of pyruvate dehydrogenase, it allows what is called the electron transport chain to go through its sort of normal function of oxidative phosphorylation and ultimately like producing energy. It's complicated bioenergetics that aren't really needed for this video. The point is, we lose a critical component that allows us to utilize glucose properly. And that makes it so we have higher levels of insulin, higher levels of glucose, and we end up putting ourselves into a vicious circle. Now, what exactly is triggering this? Well, a lot of it is speculated around something called hypoxia-inducible factor 1, another complicated jargon, right? We'll just call it HIF1. Now, the reason that HIF1 increases is it's directly correlated with an increase in reactive oxygen species, which is just oxidative stress. You see, as we get older, we have less ability to process the natural waste that comes from our cellular functions. It's just par for the course. That's a normal process of aging, less efficiency in metabolizing waste. So as you get older, you have more oxidative damage. Well, this oxidative damage elevates this HIF1, this HIF1. HIF1 directly has an impact on pyruvate dehydrogenase. So once that happens, well, okay, we're not necessarily at the end of the rope. We can make some changes, but it makes it much, much harder. I guess the good news with this is if you're someone that is what is called fat adapted, where, you know, maybe you've done a lot of endurance work during your life, or maybe you've periodically cycled in and out of keto or something like that, maybe that's allowed you the ability to utilize fats more effectively. Now, what that would do is that would effectively give you a backup plan. What I mean by that is when your cells and your muscles aren't wanting to use glucose a whole lot, at least they have a backup to be able to utilize fat. But a lot of us aren't so lucky, right? Like, I started doing keto 10 years ago, so I probably developed some ability to that, but keto only got bigger in the last few years. So there's a lot of people that probably don't have that fat adaptation, but can you get it? Well, here's where carb cycling comes in. I have a few other things, okay? Because a lot of it comes down to how do we improve the cell's ability at the muscle level to use glucose better, improve insulin sensitivity. Okay, the first thing that I would recommend people over the age of 40 do, whether they are following a ketogenic protocol or not, is do some form of carb cycling. Okay, you have to occasionally deprive your body of carbohydrates so that your body will upregulate pyruvate dehydrogenase. Okay, when you are deprived of carbohydrates, not even necessarily in ketosis, your body says, well, we better upregulate this PDH to try to be able to metabolize carbs, because as far as your body is concerned, it just thinks that it's not processing carbs. It doesn't realize that you're not consuming them. It just thinks, uh-oh, we need to like increase the sensitivity and the ability to utilize glucose. So periodically plummeting your carb levels, not even necessarily the keto levels, but I would really recommend it like 3 days per week. It's called carb cycling, or vice versa, where you predominantly stay low carb and then occasionally have carbohydrates. That's really a good move. We also have to look at something called mitochondrial biogenesis. Okay, so our cells within our muscles have mitochondria, and the mitochondria processes energy. Well, normally that mitochondria will take in glucose and it will process it and transfer components of it into the mitochondria from the other areas of the cell, utilizing what's called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. But again, complicated bioenergetics we don't need to talk about. But as we get older, we lose some of that mitochondria. We lose some of that mitochondrial mass, okay, some of the ability to process that. So we do have to pay attention to ways that we can improve mitochondrial density. How do we get more mitochondria? Okay, so if the mitochondria, if each individual mitochondria has lost some ability to process glucose, the best way that we can get around it is by at least creating more factories. Okay, so think about it like this. You have one really powerful factory when you're young. This one powerful factory is just rocking it, right? It's just creating energy like crazy. Well, that factory started to lose some efficiency as it got older. Parts started to get worn, people started to quit. You're left with this one factory. But you have a backup plan. Your backup plan is, well, we could never rebuild the Titanic. That thing's too massive. We can never rebuild this factory. But what we could do is we could at least build lots of smaller factories to at least try to equal what we used to have. So that becomes the new goal, is mitochondrial biogenesis. And one of the quickest ways, once again, you can do that is periodically shifting into a ketogenic state. Even if you're not going all the way deep keto, just depriving yourself of carbs so your body has no choice but to say, we got to build factories and we got to build them now. So it starts to build them up, okay? FYI, during this time, I would recommend you check out Thrive Market, because if you're doing any kind of carb cycling, it just makes sense because they have a lot of just awesome goodies. It would make life really simple. For example, what you do, they're an online membership-based grocery store. So you log on to Thrive, you select the ketogenic tab and pick from any of the foods that are in that ketogenic tab. Okay, and those are foods that you could eat on your lower carb day. It just makes it that simple. Okay? And then they get delivered right to your doorstep. You don't have to go to the grocery store. You don't have to scour the aisles. It's what I use, and they have been a big supporter of this channel for years and years. And I just tremendously recommend them for people that want to take some of the guesswork out of shopping, but also just get better for you foods they might not be able to get at their local grocery store. Plus, very economical. And if you use the link down below, you save 25% off of a membership and get a free gift. So thank you to Thrive Market for the continued support, and please do check them out so that you can figure out what to eat on your lower carb days. So what this periodic carb cycling is going to do is really three things, okay? One, it's going to improve your insulin sensitivity overall, okay? Just again, like I mentioned, okay? Secondly, ketones and just any other kind of alternative fuel source like fatty acids versus glucose are going to trigger less reactive oxygen species. The burning of glucose uses a lot of fuel and it creates a lot of waste, okay? So you are only yielding 2 energy currencies, ATP, through the burning of glucose versus oxidative phosphorylation with fatty acids and beta oxidation using fat and ketones, you're generating more than 30 units of energy, ATP. Again, if you're into bioenergetics, that makes sense, but it's pretty simple math. Would you rather have 1 unit of energy, or would you rather have 2 units of energy or 30 plus units of energy, right? Okay, so by creating more units of energy with less fuel, you have less waste. I mean, I don't drive a Prius, but it's a pretty simple example, right? Take a Prius or a Tesla versus, I don't know, some kind of like, I don't know, 1996 Ford F-350 diesel, right? Whole different ball game, right? Same amount of fuel coming in, much different output. The point is that ketones burn clean. So that means less reactive oxygen species, which means less, you guessed it, hypoxia-inducible factor 1, which improves how much pyruvate dehydrogenase we have, which improves the affinity of the glucose molecule within the cell so that we don't have hyperinsulinemia and so that we end up utilizing carbs better. And then the third one simply has to do with the brain, okay? Now, if you cycle on and off carbohydrates, you allow your brain the ability to occasionally tap into ketones, which stabilizes what's called network stability. It improves the ability of regions within your brain to communicate and reignites them. Your brain is simple. If you don't use it, you lose it. period. Okay, so when our glucose ability diminishes as we get older, we don't use portions of our brain. It's that simple. But they can't run on backup fats like the rest of our body can, because fats can't cross through into the brain. But ketones can. So that at least ignites. That's why we've seen a lot of cognitive decline studies showing that ketones are great to support a healthy brain as time goes on. Okay, other things you want to consider doing that are going to be hugely beneficial with bioenergetics are cold therapy. And I've talked about this in specific videos for men over 40, but if you're looking at carb cycling over 40, it's very important that you do this. Okay, on your non-carb days, on the days where you're fasting or the days where you are low carb, you do want to expose yourself to some cold therapy, okay? Whether it is going and jumping in the ocean or an ice cold lake or an ice cold bath or taking 60 to 120 second cold shower. Okay, this improves what is called uncoupling. And uncoupling takes some of the energy that's normally coming into a cell to produce energy and hijacks it and dissipates it as heat. Okay, not only does this increase your thermogenesis and increase your core body temperature, which can help you burn fat, but it forces your body to pummel more processing through the cells. And this pummeling of processing through the cells, it forces them to work. And when the cell works, again, you don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it, you gain it, right? So we want that to happen. So if we expose ourselves to cold, it forces this energy, and it stays alive in our body. This energy keeps going for hours after the exposure. This is pretty interesting. It's heavily researched. And then again, you want to look at things like exposing yourself to high heat too. If you don't have access to a sauna, you could literally take a hot bath until you're sweating quite profusely. It's very similar. In fact, hot baths, although we do have to watch out for sterility issues if you're a guy, hot baths are pretty powerful because the heat can't really escape. Okay, so you find that heat shock proteins can elevate quite a bit in a hot bath. So if you don't have a sauna, that's not an excuse. You can still take a hot bath, not scalding, but warm, and close the door, let it steam a little bit. It's the next best thing. What that's going to do is, again, it's going to improve that mitochondrial biogenesis, create more little factories, and those little factories, guess what? They can use carbs. So all this said and done, yes, it's good for healthy aging, it's good for that stuff, but it's even better for allowing you to occasionally have some carbs and know that your body's going to utilize it. Remember that cake thing I talked about in the beginning? You want that cake to be an anomaly that your body just sucks up, creates heat, and you go work it off. Not where you take it and you feel like you're just sloppy for a week after that. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.